He kissed his mistress in front of 200 people, while his black wife sat in her wheelchair, watching. The music stopped. The laughter froze. Every eye turned to the center of the room. Julian Cross, Atlanta's golden billionaire. The man who used to lift Nyla into bed, whispering, "You're my world." Now he stood under the chandeliers, holding his young assistant. Sienna Hart, perfect hair, perfect smile, laughed against his lips while guests watched in disbelief. This was their 5th anniversary, the night that was supposed to celebrate love. Instead, it became a stage for betrayal. Gasps filled the ballroom. Someone whispered, "Isn't that his wife?" Another said, "After all she's been through?" Nyla Vaughn didn't cry. Her fingers tightened on the armrest. Her smile stayed. Calm, cold, deliberate. Because Nyla wasn't smiling from pain. She was smiling because the game had finally begun. If you were Nyla, what would you do in that moment? Keep watching, and see if your choice would be anything like hers. 8 months earlier. Nyla left a late client meeting, rain tapping hard against her windshield. The road shimmered under the city lights, slick and empty. Then, a flash of headlights. A horn. Metal screamed. The world spun into silence. When she opened her eyes, the ceiling was white and still. Machines hummed beside her. Her body felt heavy, distant, like it belonged to someone else. A doctor spoke softly, words blurring through the haze. "The damage is severe. You may not walk again." The room tilted. Breath caught in her throat. She turned her head and saw Julian sitting nearby. His hand rested on hers, but his eyes, those perfect dark eyes, looked through her, not at her. It wasn't love, it wasn't fear. It was calculation, a quiet withdrawal, as if a switch had been flipped. Tears welled, but not from pain. It was the moment she knew everything had changed. The marriage, the warmth, the illusion, all fading behind that cold stare. And somewhere inside her, a new kind of silence began to grow. When Nyla came home, the mansion felt colder. Julian played his part at first. Flowers, breakfasts, in bed. Soft words that sounded rehearsed. But the warmth never reached his eyes. He stood by her wheelchair, giving orders to nurses like an impatient CEO. When she spoke of recovery, he'd nod, eyes already drifting to his phone. "Of course, sweetheart. One day." Always one day, never now. At night, she'd wake to the glow of his laptop in the next room. He'd close it fast when she called his name. His smile was too quick, too perfect. She started to count how often he touched her. Days stretched between the smallest gestures, a brush of his hand, a kiss on the forehead. Hope became heavy. The silence between them thickened until it filled every hallway. One morning, she caught her reflection in the mirror and saw it clearly. The distance in his eyes now lived in hers. And she wondered, when did love turn into pity? Or had it already died long before the crash? Days became weeks. The rhythm of their marriage slipped away piece by piece. Julian stayed out late, always with new excuses. Business dinners, investors, endless meetings. Nyla waited in the glow of the living room lamp, listening for the sound of his key in the door. It rarely came. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. Friends stopped visiting. The ones who did looked at her with that soft, careful pity she hated. Even his mother avoided her eyes, pretending to be busy with charity work. The house felt bigger every night. Her wheelchair echoed across the marble floors, each sound reminding her of how small she'd become in a life built for two. She scrolled through old photos. Smiles, vacations, promises. They looked like strangers wearing her face. Loneliness pressed in, sharp and quiet. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, she realized she wasn't waiting for him anymore. She was waiting to feel real again. But the emptiness had already chosen her, and it wasn't planning to leave. Julian came home early one afternoon, all charm and cologne. "You'll love her," he said. "My new executive assistant, Sienna Hart." Sienna was 24, bright, eager, polished like a diamond. Her smile lingered too long. Her laugh came too easily at Julian's jokes. Nyla noticed how the young woman's eyes followed him, curious, hungry. Every woman in the room would have noticed. Later, when they were alone, Nyla asked lightly, "She seems close to you." Julian's jaw tightened. "You're imagining things," he said. "You've been through a lot, Nyla. Maybe talk to your therapist about these thoughts." The words sliced deeper than he knew. Gaslighting, smooth and deliberate, turning her doubt into weakness. That night, Julian's phone buzzed with a message. He turned it face down on the table. Nyla said nothing, but she saw the corner of his mouth lift, a smile he didn't mean for her to see. And in that moment, her silence began to take shape. Not surrender, something colder, something waiting. Days turned into months, and Nyla's world grew smaller. Friends stopped calling. When they did, their voices dripped with pity, not care. They spoke slowly, as if tragedy had made her fragile. The magazines called her the billionaire's broken wife. Headlines loved her tragedy more than her success. The woman who once gave business advice on television was now reduced to a headline and a wheelchair. Even strangers stared when she went out. Some smiled with fake sympathy. Others looked away, embarrassed by her existence. Julian barely noticed. His attention lived in his phone, in meetings, in everything that wasn't her. The house was full of noise but empty of warmth. At night, Nyla sat by the window. Her reflection looked like a ghost trapped behind glass. For the first time she felt what death might feel like, still breathing, but unseen. And deep down, something inside her whispered, "They've already buried you." But that voice didn't sound broken. It sounded angry. One night, Julian came home late again. When he leaned over to kiss her forehead, the scent hit her. Sweet, floral, expensive. Not hers. She smiled faintly. "That's a new cologne?" He froze for a second, then laughed. "A colleague hugged me at dinner. Don't start imagining things." The words slid out easily, too easily. Gaslight wrapped in affection. Later, as he showered, she sat in the dim light, staring at his jacket. The perfume lingered, proof that something was already rotting. That night his phone buzzed twice on the table. A message glowed. "Can't wait to see you." He snatched the phone too fast, forcing a yawn. "Work never ends," he said. Nyla nodded, pretending to believe him. But her chest felt cold, heavy, aware. She looked at the phone in his hand, then at her wedding ring. For the first time she wondered which one of them would disappear first. By morning, the pity was gone. Nyla knew what she had to do. She started keeping notes. Dates, receipts, late nights, names. Every lie had a trail, and she was patient enough to follow it. Julian had built his empire on order and control. She'd built her career on patterns, on knowing when numbers didn't add up. Now, she would use that skill on the man who taught her betrayal. When he walked past her, phone in hand, she smiled politely, letting him believe she was harmless. She wasn't. She was collecting truth, one quiet detail at a time. She thought of something her mother used to say. "A smart woman doesn't scream. She watches." So Nyla watched. Every late night, every careless lie, every perfume that wasn't hers. And beneath her calm, a plan began to take shape. Slow, deliberate, invisible. The kind of plan that ends with silence. And justice. It happened late one night. Julian left his laptop open before stepping into the shower. Nyla rolled closer, the hum of the screen pulling her in. At first, it was routine emails, work, meetings, investors. Then a message thread caught her eye. The accident was perfect timing. Who wants to be married to a cripple anyway? Her chest tightened, her vision blurred. She scrolled further. He'd been writing to Sienna for months. Jokes about her condition, plans for after the divorce. The words burned like acid, each one stripping away the last bit of illusion. Her hand trembled on the mouse. But she didn't cry. She read every word, memorizing them. Then she printed the messages, one by one, sliding them into a folder. Each page was a blade she would use later. When the shower stopped, she closed the laptop and rolled back to her place, calm as stone. By the time Julian walked out, She had already stopped loving him. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the marble floors. Julian kissed her cheek, pretending nothing was wrong. Nyla smiled back, quiet, unshaken. Inside, something had shifted. The part of her that once begged for his love was gone. What remained was precise, cold, and certain. She made breakfast, listened to his plans for the day, and said nothing. Every word he spoke became another line in her silent contract for revenge. When he left, she stared at the closed door. The house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a chessboard, and every piece already belonged to her. In the reflection of the kitchen window, she caught her own smile. It wasn't soft or broken. It was steel. "If he wants a war," she whispered, "he'll learn who taught him strategy." And from that moment on, her pain had a purpose, and her silence had teeth. Weeks later, Nyla sat in her doctor's office, hands clenched in her lap. Dr. Bennett smiled gently. "The nerves are responding. It's slow, but they're healing. With enough therapy, you could walk again." The words landed like a heartbeat. Quiet, powerful, impossible. For a moment, the world tilted. Walk again. 2 words she hadn't dared to imagine. Her throat tightened. "You're sure?" "As sure as medicine allows," the doctor said. "But keep this between us until you're ready." Nyla nodded. She walked out with tears she wouldn't let fall. She didn't tell Julian, not Renee, not anyone. This was hers alone, the secret no one could corrupt or control. That night, she sat in her chair, staring at her reflection in the window. Her fingers tapped the armrest, restless. Somewhere deep inside, hope stirred again, but it wasn't soft or gentle. It felt like fire. If she was going to rise, she would rise in silence. Every morning, Nyla waited until the house emptied. Then she locked the door, pulled herself to the edge of her bed, and tried to stand. The first attempt ended in pain. Her knees buckled. She fell hard, gasping. Tears blurred the floor, but she pressed her palms down, shaking, furious, determined. Day after day, she tried again. Her legs trembled like they'd forgotten who they belonged to. Bruises bloomed on her skin, proof that she hadn't stopped fighting. The first time she stayed standing for 3 seconds, she laughed through the pain. The sound startled her. It had been months since she'd heard herself laugh. Each step after that was a secret victory. No audience, no applause, just her heartbeat counting the seconds she stayed on her feet. Every movement whispered one truth. She wasn't broken. She was rebuilding, and when she finally took 3 full steps without falling, she looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "He'll never see this coming." By now, Nyla's plan had shape. Standing again wasn't enough. She needed proof, and proof required eyes that weren't hers. Through an old contact from her consulting days, she found Dean Porter, a retired detective who now specialized in private investigations. He met her in a quiet cafe. Older, cautious, with the calm of someone who'd seen everything. "I need information," she said simply. "My husband, his company, his accounts, and the woman." Dean didn't flinch. "How quiet do you want this?" "As a shadow," she replied. He nodded once. "Then you'll have it." Days turned into reports, photographs, dates, transfers, names she didn't recognize. Each page peeled away another layer of Julian's perfect life, revealing the rot underneath. Nyla read every word with steady hands, her face expressionless. Dean looked at her once and said, "You don't look surprised." She met his eyes. "I'm not." Because somewhere she had known all along. The next report hit harder than any betrayal of love could. Julian wasn't just unfaithful. He was a thief. Dean's notes were clear. Cayman accounts, fake company names, forged transfers. Money moved like smoke, impossible to track unless you knew where to look. But Nyla knew. She'd built his business with him. She recognized every shell company, every buried trail. She closed the folder and let the reality settle. The man who vowed to protect her was preparing to leave her penniless. Her pulse slowed. Her mind cleared. Anger didn't control her, it focused her. She started mapping everything out: dates, accounts, leverage, timing. For the first time, the fear that had lived in her body since the accident began to fade. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what he stole: her power, her dignity, her name. And she would take it all back, quietly, until the last piece of his empire crumbled. The final piece came from a name whispered among Atlanta's elite: Marcus Avery, a divorce attorney with a reputation for destroying men who underestimated their wives. Niela met him in his corner office, sunlight spilling across stacks of files. She slid the evidence forward: emails, photos, bank statements. Marcus read in silence, then leaned back with a slow grin. "By the time we're done," he said, "he'll wish he treated you better." The words sank in like a promise. They drafted the first filings quietly, under sealed record. Marcus outlined every step: freeze accounts, report fraud, alert the SEC, prepare for court. Nyla listened, calm and precise. For the first time in months, she felt control return to her hands. As she stood to leave, Marcus said, "You're a brave woman, Mrs. Vaughn." She smiled faintly. Not brave, just tired of being underestimated. Outside, the city hummed beneath her wheels, and for the first time it sounded like momentum. And with every document signed, momentum became movement. The plan moved quietly. Under Marcus's guidance, Nyla filed for divorce in sealed court records. The papers carried no noise, no headlines, just signatures and strategy. Together, they froze every joint account. Marcus coordinated with the SEC, submitting copies of Julian's fraudulent transfers. Each document was another silent strike. Julian continued his life as if nothing had changed. Press interviews, charity galas, photos with Sienna. His arrogance was her greatest cover. At night, Nyla watched him on television from her living room, smiling faintly. The world saw a billionaire. She saw a man walking straight into his own trap. Dean Porter sent daily updates. Marcus confirmed each motion had been accepted. The legal net was tightening, thread by invisible thread. And Julian Cross, the man who once prided himself on knowing everything, had no idea. For the first time, Nyla felt peace not from love, but from control. The silence she once feared now worked for her. It whispered, "Wait, just wait." Each week, the web grew wider. Nyla reached out to every business partner Julian had deceived. She mailed copies of his fake contracts and offshore transfers. Every envelope carried her initials, NV, like a quiet declaration of war. Dean tracked the reactions. Lawsuits started forming like storm clouds on the horizon. Rumors spread through the tech world. Investors began to pull back. Nyla didn't gloat. She calculated. Each move had a purpose, a consequence. The empire Julian built now stood on the edge of its own weight. In her office, she spread documents across the table like chess pieces. Bank accounts, shell companies, insider messages. Each line connected like a board she'd designed herself. The woman once trapped in silence was now orchestrating destruction with precision. Marcus called it poetic justice. She called it balance. Julian still kissed Sienna in public, unaware that every smile he gave was one step closer to ruin. And Nyla, patient and calm, kept setting the board. Physical therapy had become ritual. Every morning, she walked across her bedroom floor, slow, deliberate steps in silence. The first time she reached the dresser without falling, she laughed softly. Not from pride, but from power. She was building something no one could take from her again. Weeks passed, her legs strengthened. Her body remembered what it felt like to belong to her. One evening, she slipped into a long evening gown. She stood before the mirror, heels on, balance trembling but steady. For a moment she saw herself as she used to be, and more. She raised her chin. "I will stand for everything he tried to take." Her voice didn't shake. It sounded like a promise to the woman she had been, and to the woman she was becoming. That night, she rehearsed her walk, each step a declaration. Not revenge yet, but rebirth. And when she finally sat back in her chair, her smile was no longer broken. It was ready. The envelope came the next morning, hand-delivered by one of Julian's assistants. A gold seal. Elegant script. 5th Anniversary Celebration. A New Beginning. Nyla stared at it for a long time, the words sinking in. She didn't need to guess what new beginning meant. Julian planned to end the marriage in public, turn humiliation into spectacle. She traced the edge of the invitation with her finger and smiled. He had chosen the date perfectly. 5 years to the day since she said, "I do." She called Marcus. "We move that night," she said. "Everything goes into motion." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Completely." Julian's arrogance had finally handed her the perfect stage. While he prepared his performance, she was preparing her finale. The irony wasn't lost on her. He wanted a grand reveal. He would get one. He just wouldn't like the ending. The night before the party, the house glowed with quiet light. Nyla sat at her vanity, brushing her hair with slow precision. The woman in the mirror looked calm, almost serene, but her eyes held steel. Her sister Renee entered, holding a small box. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. Nyla smiled. "Tomorrow, he learns who he married." They said nothing more. Renee hugged her once, long and trembling. Then she left. Nyla stayed up late, reviewing every detail. The files were secured. The presentation was ready. Marcus and Dean would be there, waiting in the crowd. She opened her phone, scrolling through old photos, wedding day, vacations, laughter frozen in time. Then she deleted them all. Midnight came. She stood by the window, watching the city lights. Tomorrow, she would stand again. This time, not just on her feet. She would stand in truth, and when she did, the world would finally see her. The ballroom shimmered with gold and noise. Chandeliers burned above 200 guests, all dressed to witness another performance of the perfect marriage. Julian took the microphone, his voice smooth, his smile rehearsed. "Tonight," he said, "is about new beginnings, about following your heart and choosing happiness." The crowd clapped politely. Nyla sat near the front, still in her chair, diamonds glinting at her throat. Her face was unreadable. Then Julian reached for Sienna's hand. He pulled her close, kissed her deeply in front of everyone. Gasps cut through the room like glass breaking. Someone dropped a drink. Sienna smiled against his lips, triumphant. Cameras flashed. Whispered gossip filled the air like static. Julian looked at Nyla afterward as if daring her to react. She didn't move. Her hands rested calmly on her lap, her eyes steady. He smiled wider, mistaking her silence for defeat. But Nyla Vaughn was no longer the woman who cried. She was the woman who planned. And tonight, her plan had just begun. Julian held the microphone again, his confidence swelling. He cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said, voice echoing off marble walls. "I filed for divorce." Gasps again. A few murmurs. Sienna squeezed his arm, glowing. "She's pregnant," Julian continued, gesturing to her. "We're starting a new chapter. And as for Nyla," he turned toward his wife, "I've prepared a settlement. $2 million. More than fair for a woman who, let's be honest, can't stand on her own anymore." The words fell heavy and cruel. Some guests turned away. Others stared, waiting for Nyla to crumble. Julian handed a folder to his lawyer, signaling him to bring it over. "Sign tonight, darling," he said. "Let's make this official in front of everyone." Silence. Renee, standing near the back, looked ready to step forward, but Nyla raised her hand slightly. "Don't." Her face stayed calm, her eyes glimmering with something unreadable. Julian mistook it for surrender, but it wasn't surrender. It was precision. Nyla reached for the microphone, her fingers steady. The lawyer hesitated, then handed it to her. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice carried farther than anyone expected. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this special night." People shifted, confused. Her smile was gentle, almost serene. "I want to congratulate my husband and Sienna," she continued. "A new beginning deserves a toast." Julian frowned slightly, unsure where this was going. Sienna clung tighter to his arm. Nyla's tone never changed. Calm, polite, graceful. But her eyes, they gleamed like ice under sunlight. She raised her glass. "To truth," she said, "and to the beautiful things that come to light when people finally stop pretending." A faint murmur ran through the crowd. Julian laughed, forced and shaky. Nyla set down the glass, smile still fixed in place. "You wanted an ending, Julian," she said quietly. "I think you'll get one." The tension in the room thickened until no one dared to breathe. Then she placed her hands on the arms of her wheelchair. For a moment, no one understood what she was doing. Nyla's arms pushed down on the chair's sides. Her body trembled. The sound of effort filled the silence. Then, she rose. The crowd gasped as one. A few guests covered their mouths. Cameras froze mid-air. Julian's expression shifted from arrogance to disbelief. His glass slipped, shattering on the floor. Nyla stood tall, steady in her heels. The gown shimmered around her legs no one thought would ever move again. "I forgot to mention," she said softly, voice cutting through the air, "I've been walking for 4 months now." Sienna stepped back, pale. Julian's mouth opened, but no words came. Nyla smiled again, the same smile that had terrified him once before. "This party," she said, "was the perfect place to tell the truth." Applause didn't come. The room was too stunned. For the first time, Nyla wasn't the woman in the chair. She was the storm they never saw coming. Nyla lifted her phone and tapped a button. The ballroom lights dimmed, and the giant screens behind them flickered to life. Text messages appeared. Julian's words to Sienna. "The accident was perfect timing. She's nothing now. She'll sign whatever I give her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nyla's voice stayed calm. "Let's keep going." Photos followed. Bank statements, offshore transfers, fake companies. Every secret Julian buried, now exposed in front of 200 witnesses. He lunged toward the screen. "Turn that off!" he shouted. But no one moved. Phones were already recording. Nyla didn't flinch. "You called me weak," she said evenly. "But weakness doesn't build empires. It destroys them." Marcus Avery stepped forward from the audience, holding a folder. "Mr. Cross, you've been served," he announced. The crowd erupted in whispers. Julian stood frozen, eyes wide, breath shallow. Nyla looked at him one last time. "This was your new beginning," she said. "Consider this my ending." And as the evidence played on, the man who thought he owned everything finally realized. He'd lost it all, and as the last image faded from the screen, the silence broke, not from her, but from him. Julian's voice broke the silence. "You can't do this!" he shouted, but it was already done. Marcus Avery stepped forward, calm and precise. "Actually, we can," he said, motioning to the doors. They opened, and 2 FBI agents entered, badges flashing under the chandelier's light. Murmurs filled the air as they walked toward the stage. One guest gasped. Another whispered, "Is this real?" Julian tried to back away, but one agent took his arm, twisting it behind his back. The click of the handcuffs echoed like a gunshot. The cameras turned into a storm. Every phone in the room lit up, capturing the fall of the man who thought he couldn't fall. "You're under arrest for securities fraud and embezzlement," the agent said. Julian turned to Nyla, face pale, eyes wild. "You set me up." She met his gaze, steady and cold. "No, you set yourself up. I just turned on the lights." They led him away as the crowd watched in stunned silence. For the first time, Nyla felt the air shift. Not freedom yet, but justice. The ballroom buzzed with whispers. Guests parted as Nyla walked forward, her heels striking marble. Sharp, measured, final. Sienna stood frozen near the bar, her mascara running. Someone shouted her name, but she turned and fled through a side door. Julian's mother stepped in Nyla's path, trembling. "I didn't know, dear. I swear I didn't." Nyla stopped, looked her straight in the eye, and said softly, "You smiled while he humiliated me. That's all I need to know." Then she walked past her without another word. Renee appeared near the exit, tears streaming, pride shining through them. "You did it," she whispered. Nyla squeezed her hand. "We did." The photographers outside were already waiting. Flash after flash painted her face in white light as she descended the steps. No tears, no victory speech, just quiet grace. The woman the world once pitied now walked into the night, unbroken, unstoppable, and free. By morning, the story had consumed the nation. Billionaire arrested at his own anniversary party. Headlines spread faster than wildfire. Crosstech stock plummeted 20% before noon. Partners withdrew their funding. Lawsuits multiplied. Julian's board of directors issued a public statement distancing themselves. In a single day, the empire he built collapsed under the weight of his greed. He pleaded guilty months later, sentenced to 18 months in minimum security. The once charmed billionaire now wore a jumpsuit instead of a tuxedo. Sienna disappeared. Some said she moved overseas. Others said she was never pregnant at all. Nyla didn't celebrate. She didn't need to. Justice wasn't a trophy. It was a closing door. One evening, she drove past the mansion they'd once shared. The lights were off, the gate chained shut. For the first time, she didn't feel bitterness, only peace. What he destroyed had become the foundation of something new, herself. 6 months later, the sun rose over Atlanta. Nyla's running shoes hit the pavement, steady and sure. Her breath matched the rhythm of her heartbeat, stronger now, cleaner. She ran past the park where she once sat in her wheelchair, watching others move. The memory no longer hurt. It reminded her of distance covered. Her consulting firm had just launched, Vaughn Advisory Group, dedicated to helping women protect their assets and their power. The waiting list was already full. She walked into her new office, sunlight spilling across the polished wood. On her desk sat a framed photo, not of Julian, but of her sister and Dr. Bennett, the two people who never stopped believing she could stand again. "I'm not bitter," she said quietly to herself. "I'm better." The woman who once fought to survive now taught others to win. Her story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. Night settled over Atlanta, quiet and steady. The city that once held her pain now, night settled softly over Atlanta, the city lights stretching like quiet promises. The chaos was over, and so was the version of Nyla who once lived in fear. She breathed in the stillness. The storm that had broken her had also rebuilt her, piece by piece. What she lost in love, she gained in strength. Never underestimate a woman who's been quiet too long. The thought wasn't vengeance, it was truth. Julian's name had faded from headlines, but her life had just begun to take shape again. Her company thrived, her peace felt earned. Some would say she went too far, others would say she finally went far enough. But one thing was certain. Silence had never been weakness. It had always been preparation. If her story reached even one woman who needed to remember her own worth, then every scar was worth it. And if you believe in stories where women rise, where strength grows from pain and dignity never dies, stay here. Support us with a subscription. Turn on notifications. Because Nyla's story is only one of many still waiting to be told.